Then we move on to principal reports. Top of the evening to Jeff. How did you manage the green jacket?
Good evening. Once a year I can break this baby out and dust it off. So happy St. Patrick's Day, school board members. Over at Trailside, just a couple things I want to highlight. First of all, after our winter maps window closed in January, in February we had 2 data days where we had all grade levels come together, as well as Mrs. Finnegan for read support. And we looked at all the winter maps data, we looked at running records, we looked at all the assessments we had done to review what sort of modifications and interventions we had in place for students. Some students, based on their progress, were moved out, other students were moved into intervention programs. So I just want to really commend all the K-6 teachers as well as Mrs. Finnegan for coming to us meetings with the data, with being prepared, with their dedication to really spending time talking about students, their learning, and where they are, and making the right adjustments for students so that they can be successful this next part of the school year. So it was two very, very good days. Also, both Kathy and Ken mentioned about the iPad, and Armeline in kindergarten, Terry Boucher in first grade, and Paul Beiser have really embraced the iPads. And every other week, on Tuesday, tomorrow's another one of those days where Sarah Shepke has the ability to meet with them to talk about the iPads, the implementation, how things are going. And I know Kathy mentioned about the work day coming up, and they really have embraced them, and they're using them in the classrooms. It's really neat to see. So I'm looking forward to them getting together with the other teachers to share what they've been doing and perhaps learn some new apps and new tricks that they haven't used the iPads yet for. So they really have embraced them in kindergarten, first and second. Also want to thank our third grade teachers, Kathy Krieger, Rebecca Romice, and Justin Thayer for their Simple Machine showcase that we had a week or so ago. Every year it's like a little science fair in the cafeteria where they have wheels and axles and levies and pulleys and inclined planes and all sorts of simple machines, and it's quite the display to see what the kids come up with in the cafeteria. Also reports on inventors, so it's quite the lead-in for future, science fairs and experiments. So the third grade Simple Machine Showcase is always kind of fun to see what the kids do. And finally, just want to give a shout out to my colleague here to my right, Mrs. Markle. She came over first week of March, did an annual visit with our 6th grade students, and she takes a day away from, well, actually 3 days away. When you look at all 3 schools, she takes 3 days away from her building to come over and introduce herself to the kids. Now with Mrs. Sigismund, the school counselor, they do a program introducing the kids to Fox River. She meets with the teachers before school to get a little discussion about the students, a little scouting report if you may. And then after the presentation to the kids, she meets with each student individually for about 5 minutes, and she does that from the whole day. So it really gives her a good basis for knowing the kids, because Fox River, as you know, is such a short time there, just 2 years, and so it gives her an advantage knowing the kids and having some dialogue with them before they come to the building. So I really appreciate that she does that, and I know it probably benefits her as well. So thank you, Carmen.
Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome. Any questions for Trailside? All right, thank you.
Good evening. Let's spread awareness. Sorry. Just a couple of thank yous tonight. And the first one goes out to Mrs. Campbell, the art teacher. And she spends hours and hours of her time displaying our students' artwork on the program Artsonia. Excuse me. And she's taking photos of all of their work and putting it online for parents, grandparents, and all of their families, wherever they're located. And it's a very nice thing. In fact, I've had some parents who serve in the military who have the opportunity to see their students' work for where they serve. So it takes a lot of time and hours, and she's there early in the morning and often later at night to do that. And then I also want to thank her for displaying one of our, excuse me again, one of our students' artwork, and she was voted the top vote getter for an artwork that was displayed, and thus the student received $100, and also Mrs. Campbell for some art supplies. So that was, I appreciate her work on that. And then I'd like to thank our 3rd and 6th grade teachers who are working on the Smarter Balance test coming up in the very near future. And I don't know if they understood when they were so nicely selected by the state to say, oh, it's your turn. But there is a number of hours of work getting our students prepared for that and getting themselves prepared. So I thank them for the work that they're putting into that. And then I'd like to thank the kindergarten teachers for the kindergarten screening that took place a few weeks ago. And then they also, excuse me again, held a patriotic parade that brought in a lot of their parents. They do some things with the music of patriotism, and also as they celebrate the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and George Washington and President's Day. So they do their celebration around the school and have their annual march. And it's a nice thing, but it brings parents in, and they're very appreciative of that. Then lastly, I'd like to thank 2 layers of leadership in the building, and who helped to make my job an easier one by the work that they do. And in the building, because of how our building is set up in wings, I have a person in each wing who is a leader in the wing, who helps take care of leadership in the areas of building community, working with the rules and procedures of the building, and they are very good about working with our students at that level. And then I also have, at every grade level, is a team leader. So we have team leader meetings, wing leader meetings, and team leaders work on the curriculum areas in our building and instruction, and helping their colleagues on their team to talk about instruction on a continuous basis, to talk about data, and to share lessons and such with each other. So I'm very appreciative of the work that they do to help me stretch my leadership beyond my work. So I appreciate that. You're in my lap. No.
I'm just hoping this isn't a camera.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
First of all, I'd like to thank our 21st Century Committee within our building. Under Sarah Shepke's leadership, they've really been emphasizing the utilization of the Moodle, the Twitter, iPads. I'm seeing a lot more technology included in instruction. Mrs. Wagner, Mrs. Harmelin, Mrs. Stott, Mrs. Serby, Mrs. Pennington, and Mrs. Oakey have really taken on leadership roles in expanding the utilization of technology. As Shirley mentioned, we had kindergarten screening. Pam Lobach and Sarah Eggers really organized it well. Sarah Lesh and Jenny Reed, our speech people, were also very helpful. We've had a couple issues with early students and math acceleration issues, and Donna Coley, the 1st grade teacher, along with Mrs. G, have really handled those meetings very well as that been involved. 504s and IEPs at this time of the year are really, we're busy with them. And I really would like to extend my gratitude to Mike Rosendich, who's been very helpful in organizing and scheduling and working with the special ed staff. Last week, I think it was last Friday, the Crisis Committee during our in-service time, Brenda Serby, Shelley Wagner, Joel Beffert, Mrs. Borchert, Mrs. Kravchuk, Mrs. Anderson, and Mrs. Setterstrom all did a very nice job as we worked through a tabletop activity. I'd like to thank Julie Campbell, who has filled in the afternoons as the secretary, as we have a half-time secretary in the morning going over to Trailside to do some title math. Julie Campbell's really done a nice job, so I appreciate that. And parent-teacher conferences, very well attended. All invited parents showed up, and I feel they were very productive. Met with the teachers afterwards and had conferences, and they were encouraged by the parental input. And today we had the Trinity Dancers.
Really?
which was kind of interesting. They've been, for about 2 or 3 years, been trying to set up a date that they could come in. And they coordinated it with our PTO person, who so happened to fall on St. Patrick's Day. And it was about a 45-minute presentation where they talked about the culture of Ireland. The students learned how to count in Gaelic. I think they got up to 3, but nonetheless, they learned to count in Gaelic. It was a lot of fun. So it was a good presentation.
Where did the group come from?
We have one student, a fifth grader, Morgan Marifke, who is a member of them. So it's local, but in order to get a big enough group, it really takes in from a lot of the surrounding areas. And I know Morgan was pretty proud of herself, as she should be. And we'll check out the gym floor tomorrow because it took a pounding today.
Okay, thank you, good evening. As Mr. Yoke said, we had the Parents' Day. We had 143 parents in the building that day that spent either a partial or the entire day with us, ate lunch, so it was great. I just wore my parent shirt that day, so it's great. I want to recognize Mrs. Poole. She took a Saturday out of her busy schedule, and she took 17 of our young men to Madison to the 4th annual Madison Boy Choir Fest. And these are boys who are just very, very committed to singing, and she bussed up there with them and just had a fantastic time with them. The boys, and just a great opportunity for them. Mrs. Kinner worked really, really hard with the 7th grade teachers, and we had our junior achievement field trip 2 weeks ago. The kids, it was great. I just highlighted a couple feedback things from kids right here. I learned that the bigger a house, the bigger the electric bill.
Yes.
I learned that you have to get a good education in order to get a good paying job, and that will help me to get a good income. The hardest part was saying no, because I wanted to put a lot of my money towards entertainment. And if you have a better education, the more pay you'll get. So those are some of the key ones I pulled off from some student feedback. Great opportunity. The kids work hands-on up there. Positive responses from the parents. We had tons of parent volunteers go with us because we kind of had X amount per kids. And the parents said, "Oh my gosh, I wish, I am going to need to do this, Mrs. Markle, with my budgeting." So it was very, very well received. I want to say thank you to Mrs. Kluppel. She has worked very hard on her Signs of Suicide Prevention program in the building, which heightens and brings awareness to our students through the health class. And then her and Mrs. Signuson spend a lot of time with parents and students as they learn about different things with that, and then, think about their lives and where they're at. And then the 2 ladies work very hard with the students in the building. As Jeff said, Mrs. Signuson, I appreciate all her help as we do our visits to the 6th grade buildings, and where we're at with that. Mr. Weil has just spent an enormous amount of time on safety in our building and the things we do in our tabletops like Chris talked about, and I just really want to recognize him for that also. And last week, Mrs. Nelson had 68 students from the band attend Friday Fun Night. Lots of things happening in the building. They played flashlight tag down in the basement and games, so just a really fun time for all the kids.